Hey, it's Gary Carpenter here, and with the MREA Master Real Estate Academy and the production program. And if you're watching this video, chances are you had just finished up a session 3 live video where we covered POCA, which stands for Preview of Coming Attractions. So I wanted to break this down in just an individual video so that way whoever's watching this, you can master this part of the presentation, which is huge. Okay. So all right. So just kind of set this up. Again, obviously you've set the appointment, you're headed over. We kind of know what the seller's thinking, we know what you're thinking, a little overwhelmed, little anxieties going on, whatever. Hope they like me, hope they're not going to ask me to list the house tonight, whatever the case may be. But you're prepared, you're going over there with everything, right? You've already had a great conversation, you sent over a pre-listing packet, set yourself up for success, and you've got this attitude, this winning attitude. I'm not going over there to necessarily take the listing, but heck, if they want me to take the listing, I'm going to go ahead and take it. So you're walking up to the door, you're dressed to the nines, and you ring the bell, right? Ring the bell. If the bell's not working, you're going to knock, and then you're going to smile, right? Don't get these two mixed up, right? You don't want to go up there with a big old smile on your face and then ring the bell. Chances are, if they're peeking out as you're walking up, they ain't going to answer the door. So you're going to ring the bell, smile, pay them a compliment. Pay them a compliment on what? I don't know, something. You could compliment them on the landscaping, the way the house looks on the outside. You could thank them, gratitude, right? You could thank them and say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, thank you for inviting me over to chat with you about your home. You can compliment them about, the way they look, maybe kids at the door, whatever the case may be. Just think compliment, because you're basically trying to connect with them. And then you're going to take them to the kitchen table. Why the kitchen table? Because the master sales person goes to the kitchen table where they can connect first before we're actually walking through the home. Okay. Now that's one way to do it. You set your bag down, whatever you have, you set it down at the front door, let the seller take control of the appointment. And then you start walking around the house, which to me, this is in reverse, right? If this is a listing appointment, if they're ready to list their house, they just got to make the decision on you, your company, that type of stuff. Take them to the kitchen table where you can then break the ice, right? You're going to connect with them. You've already probably done some connecting on the phone with one Mr. or Mrs. Seller, but now you're going to connect with both of them, right? They may offer you a glass of water, but again, why the kitchen table? The kitchen table is where you can spread out, and it's also where people basically break bread, right? It's where family gathers. It's where decisions a lot of the times are made. So you're going to take them to the kitchen table where you're going to break the ice, and then we're going to POCA, preview of coming attractions. Okay. So now the setup. So now you've taken them to the kitchen table, you've sat down, you've connected with them, you've talked about baseball, apple pie, anything but real estate. Okay. But you've been interested more than you were interesting. And now, at this stage of connection to setting up for the POCA, is how do you know when to go from this step from the connection? Well, you're giggling, you're laughing, you feel good that you've connected with them, and you want to take time with that, right? Because if you skip that first step of connecting with them, it's not going to make things any easier as the appointment goes along. But you want to connect with them, and I would stay there in that this piece of the pie of the presentation, and as long as it takes. Okay. And then you're going to do the setup, right? And the first thing for the setup of the POCA is you're going to get permission. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it seems like we've connected this evening. And I would like to ask for your permission to show with you how I work. So again, if they say yes, if you say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, may I share with you how I work? They say yes, they're handing over control of the appointment. Okay. So you're getting permission. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, may I share with you how I work? They say yes. Well, I want to reassure you here this evening, use of names, Bob and Jeanette, that I'm not here for the sheer sake of taking a listing, because guess what? Any real estate agent can do that. Would you basically agree with that? Well, you know what? I brought with me what we call an expired list, or also what's called a fall through list, which is basically sellers like yourself who decided that they wanted to sell, and they had essentially two things in common. The first thing that they had in common was that um, they had plans, they wanted to move, they wanted to get top dollar for their home. And the second thing that they had in common is that, in my opinion only, the seller and the agent probably should have never gotten into that relationship. And for one reason, and one reason only, is that that agent did not communicate to that seller at this stage kind of the process of what direction we should go. And there's a lot of people that are on this list that maybe had some questions that did not get answered. Would you agree that we don't want to end up on a fall through list, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? You would? Well, me too. So in order for this not to happen, I've created a 5-step infallible system that literally takes the guesswork out of whether or not you and I should do business this evening. May I share it with you? So that infallible system, that's the preview of coming attractions. Okay. That's a step-by-step process. That's the agenda for the evening. We'll go over that here in just a second. But right now, when you're sitting here with Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it's usually, there's opposites, right? There's the analytical and there's the emotional. Everybody's got a little bit of both, but typically when we're at this presentation making this type of a decision, there's one that's the analytical and one that's the emotional. And so you're going to talk with emotional words: infallible, reassure, introducing the fear of loss. I mean, all of those types of things are ingredients of being able to communicate and talk to, use of names, to be able to communicate and talk with each individual seller. And again, take your time with this. Don't rush through it. Rewind the video. Watch this over and over again when it comes to setting up for the preview of coming attractions. So essentially, the next step is the preview of coming attractions. You're going to have your laptop presentation. I mean, you could do it in a flip chart if you want to. My suggestion is you use a little technology, maybe an iPad or something like that, but you're going to have this on here. Now, I have all the steps on here. Typically, the way that I would present it is I would have step 1 come up. I would talk about step 1. Step 2, talk about step 2, and then on through the rest of the steps. But also, too, I'm going through all of these steps, describing them to them before I go to step 1. Okay, so basically, we're unpacking what our agenda is for the evening. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, our infallible process starts with step 1, which is I'm going to ask some questions so that I can understand your concerns. Now, Bob, I talked to you earlier this week before I set up the appointment, had to do a lot of homework on your home, but also asked you some questions about the process and how you kind of want this thing to go out. I'm going to kind of reiterate some of those questions, maybe ask additional ones, maybe go a little bit deeper on those questions. But also, Janet, since we have you here this evening, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page on what direction we want to go. And then that way, once I get a crystal clear picture of what direction we're going to go with this, then we'll get up from the kitchen table here. We'll walk through the property, and I want you to show me the property as if you would show it to a buyer. And with your permission, what I would love to do is I would love to be able to maybe point out some things that might make your home a little bit more sellable. Would you be okay with that? Again, asking permission to be able to point out some things that they may need to do in order to make their house move a little bit quicker and for a little bit more money. And then what we'll do after we look at the property is we'll come back to the kitchen table. We'll go over a customized marketing plan. And we'll essentially, I want to know what you love about the home. Because there's either 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 2-car garage homes that are in the neighborhood that have sold. But I want to know specifically what you liked about the home, so that way we can incorporate those things within the marketing plan. And then we'll go to step number 4, which we'll talk about price, because I know that, talking to Bob on the phone the other day, that was one thing that was majorly important to him. Commission's important to him. So we'll all talk about that in the estimate of net, because to be honest with you, my clients of doing this for 25 years are more interested in what they actually walk away with net, that makes sense to them, than what they pay for me, what they pay in commissions, what they pay in closing costs, all that type of stuff. So we'll come up with a net figure that hopefully will meet the goals that you want to accomplish. And then we'll go to step number 5. We'll talk about the forms, the contracts, the listing agreement. We'll talk about the timing. We'll talk about what Gary Carpenter and ABC Real Estate will be doing for you during all this process. And then obviously the timing. We had talked, Bob, we had connected about the timing analysis that I wanted to show you, kind of the segments of time on what it takes from beginning to end to get your house sold, that you guys can really pick that right time to get your house on the market. And then hopefully by the time we're done, we'll come up with a mutual decision on whether or not you and I should do business this evening. How does that sound? And then you shut up, you pause, you let them talk, and then you go to step number 1, right? And step number 1 is asking those questions. But we're not going to cover those on this video, because this was the preview of coming attractions. So just take a look at the next video when we go over what questions to ask when you're on the presentation. And if you have any additional questions to this, please feel free to reach out. You can call me at 402-680-7000, or again, you can email me. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the video, and I hope that this helps.